So I have a little quirk about me I want to explain to the audience real quick. I like to fill in gaps sometimes, and specifically the media I engage in. Now that varies depending on what it is, but if it's like D&D or Warhammer, I tend to make things up to fill in the gaps the author leaves behind for, well, the intended case of homebrewing or potentially fixing holes in a plot. Or in my favorite case, fully realizing an idea the author either didn't do or never wanted to. Now I do this for a lot of anime, but in specific to my favorite one, that being JoJo's, there's one infamous case that I always come back on. What is the full potential of Silver Chariot Requiem from the stand Requiem? And for the layman who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Requiem is the Requiem evolved state of Silver Chariot, the stand of Jean-Pierre Polnareff, and in the original story, he was not worthy to get a controlled Requiem level stand, unlike Giorno Giovanna and Gold Experience Requiem. But what if Polnareff actually did get a controlled stand? So what would Silver Chariot Requiem actually look like and feel like within the world of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? And could it possibly be the strongest stand point blank ever? On top of that, if you like the ideas of conceptualizing a stand, how it could affect the story and the overall setting, and a bit of power scaling because it's a Requiem stand, you gotta power scale it, this video is for you. So with that all being said, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me. So before we start conceptualizing the strongest stand, we need to lay out some groundwork, a foundation, a base for what we're going to do, because I want to make an authentic Requiem stand that can fit into the universe of JoJo's and not make some glorified hyper fan concept OC thing. We have a level of professionalism on this channel we have to uphold here. So first things first, let's talk about Requiem, the stand, and Requiem, the ability. Now the first thing I think a lot of people are asking right now is, Metas, why do you keep referring to Chariot Requiem as Requiem? Well, because that's its name. I double checked this, by the way, before recording. In both the official Viz translation of the manga and the fan translation of the manga, both refer to the stand as Requiem. It's not till later after its debut that Polnareff refers to it as Chariot Requiem. However, by then, Polnareff refers to it as Requiem so many times it's hard to tell whether he's talking about the stand or the ability that the Requiem arrow grants. And yes, the Requiem arrow does exist. I'm tired of hearing that fucking argument. Chekhov's gun basically disproves the non-Requiem argument. The arrows look different, they activate differently. One brings out the further potential of a stand user that already has a stand, while the other pierces a stand, evolving it, giving it the ability to dominate all types of souls, and having a failsafe of making a non-worthy stand user stand a Berserk Requiem. Keep that in mind, we're going to talk about it later, while also giving a massive visual upgrade for said stand, which the other one does not. Getting back on track, the naming convention of Requiem has led to a lot of confusion, so much so that some people interpret the story completely differently when it comes to these stands and their abilities. Remember when I said Requiem has the ability to dominate human souls? Well, that line comes from Polnareff. However, if you read it in a vacuum without reading any of the stand stat statements from Requiem and Gold Experience Requiem, you might think that Polnareff is just referring to the stand. However, he's not. He's referring to the phenomenon and the energy of Requiem, not the stand itself. So the giant misinformation storm that is the idea that the Requiem arrow grants you the ability you need during any given moment once stabbed is completely wrong. This also ends up explaining why GR is granted these abilities. It's because Return to Zero and the Death Loop are soul based. You never finish your attack because I'm controlling your soul. You wanted to hit me, but I didn't let you. You died, but I didn't let your soul go to the next place. So on and so forth. I think with Requiem, it's a bit more obvious, but GR is also in the same category and wasn't given his powers willy-nilly. Now, I'll deconstruct Requiem's stand abilities later on in the video, so I can reconstruct them into a better stand with better abilities, so I'll just save that for later. So with the Chariot Requiem and Requiem ability / energy out of the way, let's move on to probably the more important piece of all of this, Polnareff and Silver Chariot just in general. Character-wise, story-wise, and yes, even power scaling-wise, because trust me, this shit gets pretty nasty later on. Grant me another privilege of asking you another question. Why wasn't Polnareff worthy? What does worthiness in JoJo even look like? This is confusing for me for a number of reasons, because when we look at Polnareff's life, we observe a man who is beyond worthy of many things. Polnareff's early life was weird to begin with. He was a natural born stand user and has had Silver Chariot for most of his life. However, tragically, because of stands, his sister would eventually be I don't want to say it. So he has a lot of vengeance in his life. And so for a majority of his early young adult life, he would be searching for Jay Guile and eventually would meet with the Joestars and their crusade against Dio Brando, the man employing Jay Guile and his mother. And Polnareff would get his revenge thanks to Kakyoin, Abdal, Iggy, and the rest of the Crusaders, especially Jotaro. However, in the final battle, almost as a give and take, Kakyoin, Abdal, and Iggy would die. And we see he still cares about them when his physical body dies in part 5, as that is the last thing he thinks about before the soul swap. But before that and after part 3, Polnareff would not stop his crusade. He still fights evil up until the last moment of his life, trying to protect Europe from the drug trade caused by Diavolo, which he would sadly not stop as Diavolo would cook him. However, somehow Polnareff survives that through his insane durability, and then would become a paraplegic and try to find other people that could stop Diavolo in his place. So if you do a surface view analysis of Polnareff's life and determine that worthiness is goodness, Polnareff has to be worthy. There's no way he's not. He's basically on the same level as Jotaro, because eventually post part 3, both of them are doing like a whole bunch of side quests for the Speedwagon Foundation in order to protect the world post Dio. On top of the fact that his whole story is about vengeance and then learning to overcome that vengeance, as vengeance is bad and it should be a heroic need of saving than just pure bloodlust. Now, if that was the case, we would already see Silver Chariot Requiem. Worthiness does not equal goodness, and vice versa. The arrow operates under something different. And using Giorno as an example, I think we can actually come to a pretty good conclusion on how the Requiem arrow operates. Worthiness in this case is actually the same as heroic resolve. Throughout all of part 5, these characters, in specific Giorno, have to go through a heroic resolve moment, where they have to become steadfast in their beliefs of what they believe in order to win and in order to achieve their dreams. In Giorno's case, that is becoming the mafia boss, which takes a hell of a lot of resolve. And in the moments before GR is born, the ghost of Bruno Bucciolotti gives Giorno basically his blessing and a bit of prep talk saying that you're the only one that can actually defeat Diavolo in the current moment. Polnareff doesn't even have a body anymore, and Mista and Trish are kind of ass, so it's basically all on you, big dog. And that's why we see Giorno look so heroic and stoic in the anime and manga after that, because that's what he needs in the given moment. Now, paralleling off of Giorno to Polnareff and what Polnareff is feeling at this time, yeah, this obviously makes a hell of a lot of sense. He is a grizzled veteran with no control over his body as he has been crippled. His stand is no longer in its prime. The arrow refuses to give him a proper boost in power in order to defeat Diavolo, and tells us, the audience, and himself that he needs somebody else within Bruno's group to achieve a stand strong enough to beat King Crimson and Diavolo. Polnareff has no heroic resolve. He has heroism deep within inside himself, but compared to Giorno and possibly even the other characters in part 5, he is not up to par, sadly, leading to the multiple births of Requiem, the Berserk stand. So no, I don't think because he's a paraplegic he is not worthy. I think he's not worthy because he does not have a heroic resolve within him compared to the other characters. However, this is easily solvable, and we'll talk about it very soon when we get to Silver Chariot Requiem. And we can't have a Requiem without talking about Silver Chariot. Now, Silver Chariot doesn't have any claim to fame when it comes to abilities. More or less, Silver Chariot is kind of in the name. He is very knight-like, but instead of a broadsword, he uses a rapier. And where Silver Chariot doesn't have any crazy hack abilities or grand abilities just in general, other than being able to remove his armor and become faster, he makes up for that fact being a crazy case of insane stats for this franchise. Polnareff in Silver Chariot, in a lame man's way of saying it, is basically a mini Jotaro Kujo, having multiple statements of being massively faster than light going off of Polnareff himself and Jotaro. He comes out to be one of the fastest stand users in the entire franchise. On top of that, while he's not physically one of the strongest Crusaders, he's still strong enough to make even Jotaro sweat bullets during their encounter later in part 3. Mind you, very little characters have made Jotaro Kujo, the poster boy of this franchise, sweat bullets like that. So even though he's weaker, Silver Chariot's AP is still very, very high, and going off, of course, the Sun feat puts him in the range of small town to large city in terms of attack potency. And because of Polnareff's insane durability feat against Diavolo, and thanks to the JoJo Winter magazine saying that a part 3 Polnareff and Jotaro might not be strong enough to fight a part 5 Diavolo, puts Polnareff in a unique scenario where his durability is higher than his AP. So just add a plus to both small town level and large city level when scaling him. Now, like I said, this video is not going to be too power scaling heavy in terms of stats. We'll get to the hacks and abilities later, but it's basically just here to give you a neat idea of how powerful a prime Silver Chariot was before his inevitable nerf in part 5 because of his crippling. So with our foundation and base of this video set up, let's talk about Requiem and what it offers to the table before we radically change it. Now, the stand has a lot of abilities to it. To quickly go by it, it can make people in mass fall asleep for 6 to 7 hours. Don't say the fucking joke. Don't do it. I know you're thinking about it. Don't say it in the comments. Don't do it. Good. The ability to swap souls of any creature with another creature. Basically a dog to human, cat to human, human to human, human to bird, etc, etc. Very, very powerful ability. Simultaneously, on top of soul swapping, it has what I would like to describe as soul manipulation, and that's more akin to like stand manipulation. Because in the pursuit of trying to grab the arrow or affect Chariot Requiem, your stand will retaliate back against you depending on the force that you are going against Chariot Requiem. So for example, Bruno just trying to grab the arrow, Sticky Fingers will grab Bruno. So if you try to assault Requiem or Chariot Requiem, you will be assaulted by your own stand with the same amount of force you're putting into it. So it's kind of like damage reflection, basically making Chariot Requiem untouchable. Unless you're a non-stand user, in which that case, Chariot Requiem will actually just beat your ass with its own hands. On top of that, stands within Chariot Requiem's range also get a massive buff for their abilities and their overall strength and speed. And the cherry on top of all of that is that slowly anybody, including animals too, will slowly become Cronenberg monsters. And presumably as Chariot Requiem wanders the earth, everybody will fall asleep, swap souls, and then become said monsters, effectively killing off the entire planet. So on a surface level look, Chariot Requiem by himself seems incredibly nasty. Nobody in JoJo has soul hack resistances, so the minute this guy enters the battlefield, nobody's winning, is what I would say if it didn't have one of the dumbest weaknesses in the entire franchise. Now, some people are going to argue for it, but I'm going to be real here. So how do you defeat Chariot Requiem or Requiem? Simple. You break the light source behind everybody's soul, or just your soul, because it's omnidirectional, and if you break yours, you break everybody's. I'm not kidding. That's how you beat it. You just punch behind you. Now, for the people who are going to end up defending that ability because it's like, well, there were so many people there and only 2 of the people were able to figure it out, it must be much harder than you're actually saying it is. No. First off, Giorno's a rookie. He barely has any fighting stand experience in general. He's barely been using his stand to fight during the time we see in part 5. Trish has had her stand even for less time than he has, and Mista sucks. Of course, the only 2 that figure it out are the comparable stand users who are comparable to other characters like Jotaro, Koichi, Rohan, etc, etc. Polnareff, mind you, he was a ghost at this time, was trying to figure out the powers of Requiem, not trying to defeat it, and probably was a bit shell-shocked that he didn't have a body anymore because it died and his stand had gone berserk. Also, he was a turtle. So when you look at Chariot Requiem or Requiem as a whole, you start to notice that it's very powerful but has a glaring weakness to it. And with a history of Polnareff and Silver Chariot, it's kind of a sad way to go out, honestly. A man and his stand who wanted to save the world, in specific Europe, but was defeated and never showed his true potential to the world when it probably needed him the most. But that's where I come in. Sorry it took this long to get here, but I wanted to set the foundations of what this stand means to me in its full potential and to the hypothetical story here. So follow along. So where I think Polnareff could be considered worthy or gain the stand is during his second encounter with Diavolo in the Colosseum. We know that in extreme moments, Polnareff can buckle underneath the weight. Look at his fight with Cream, for example. However, in that fight, he finds the resolve to defeat Vanilla Ice towards the end after Iggy's sacrifice, because he figures out that Vanilla Ice is a vampire. So we know when Polnareff has the info on his enemy and he can figure out a guaranteed win, his confidence and resolve explodes. I think something similar happens here. Polnareff probably thinks back on Iggy, Avdol, Jotaro, who he hasn't seen in a very long time, and kind of makes a mental image of how they would look at him right now. This is what one of the last remaining Crusaders looks like, how he acts towards a villain. Pick yourself up, Polnareff. You like that kind of idea. More or less, he locks in and figures out, well, maybe that's how the arrow works. Maybe I just needed a change of mindset. And we, the audience, know that's how it works because Jordan went through the same thing with Bruno. So before King Crimson and Diavolo activate time skip again to finish off Polnareff like they did originally, Polnareff either subconsciously or consciously stabs himself with the arrow once again, kind of in a last-ditch effort to either get Chariot Requiem to come out or Silver Chariot Requiem to be born. More or less, it's just JoJo's Maharaga. However, this time it is successful thanks to the change of mindset and the heroic resolve Polnareff gained a few seconds before stabbing himself. In time skip, King Crimson does not follow the orders of Diavolo, and of course Diavolo gets pissed. Time skip ends, tries to keep on pushing forward, and the newly born Silver Chariot Requiem just stands there menacingly as King Crimson pushes back Diavolo. And now Polnareff and Diavolo see the stand in full. I imagine Silver Chariot Requiem looking a little bit like regular Requiem, but with mixture of base Silver Chariot. However, more Joan of Arc style armor with light motifs, that's hard to say, depicted on the armor, as Araki tried to do that with Gold Experience Requiem, stated in the JoJo Velar, so I feel like it is proper to do that here as well. Another thing Araki does is trying to show off the eyes of stronger stands within Part 5, looking at Gold Experience Requiem, Silver Chariot, and King Crimson. So with Silver Chariot Requiem, the eyes show off here, unlike Requiem, who kind of had no eyes or closed eyes. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. And of course, it's aura farming immediately. Hit him with the Joan of Arc pose, Silver Chariot Requiem. So to answer the immediate question all of you guys are asking is, what are Silver Chariot's new powers, or what are its abilities? Now, I'm going to be honest, they are very similar to Requiem. However, we are going to remove the automatic nature of the stand out of the equation here because it no longer needs to be automatic because Polnareff is worthy. That being the case, I'm immediately getting rid of Falling Asleep and the Soul Swap. The only reason why they're present here to begin with is in order to give Chariot Requiem some time to escape. But Polnareff is ducking no fades and wants that goddamn smoke, so he doesn't need them here. So that leaves us with a lot of powerful abilities, and in the hands of somebody like Polnareff, a very powerful stand user with a newly boosted stand, a lot of these abilities are going to be finely tuned and used much more efficiently. Now, the big main one that is kind of the return to zero for Silver Chariot Requiem is stand deflection. More or less, in this state, no stand, point blank period, can harm Polnareff, as Polnareff has now become the center of attention of Silver Chariot Requiem and has no shadow weakness because it's no longer automatic and needs to do that, because kind of in a way Polnareff is the sun that originally was behind other people. So basically it defaults to regular stand rules. Defeat the user, defeat the stand. However, just like I said, that has become impossible because no stand whatsoever in time skip, time stop, or any other ability active can't harm Silver Chariot Requiem or Polnareff, as the stand will stop listening to the orders of its user and attack them with the same force they were going to attack Polnareff or Silver Chariot Requiem. The reason why I've kept it nearly exactly the same with a slight modification to it is because it is the perfect example of the domination of souls that the Requiem energy said by Polnareff originally provides. On top of the fact that it is very similar to Return to Zero, but instead of turning a finite number into zero, it returns the attack back on the attacker. Return to Sender is a very good name I've chosen for it. But with that parallel, what about Silver Chariot Requiem's parallel to the Death Loop? Remember the Cronenberg monsters? Yeah, stick with me here. As Diavolo tries to keep pushing Silver Chariot Requiem and Polnareff again and again and again, King Crimson attacks Diavolo again and again and again. In a state of frustration, he yells, he gets angry, he looks like a total mess. Diavolo has a speech on why Polnareff isn't worthy, he's totally being ableist, he's just being a total asshole in this moment. And so, it triggers Polnareff, and he goes into a full-on stand barrage with Silver Chariot Requiem. However though, because Polnareff wants a little bit of revenge here, just like his character always has, the stand barrage leaves Diavolo crippled. However, slowly but surely, Polnareff starts to notice something, maybe is even disgusted by it. Diavolo's body begins to slowly transform into a Cronenberg monster, a giant flesh blob of some kind. Diavolo's screams of anger become whimpers, and its whimpers become nothing. It has no mouth, but Diavolo, still being able to see, must scream, and eventually loses control over his body to the monster, as his stand roams aimlessly, but being close by the blob. Polnareff doesn't know this, but Silver Chariot Requiem does. He has made Diavolo biologically immortal and a passenger in his own body, as the flesh mob will roam aimlessly just like King Crimson, forced to wander the planet to oblivion. So I need a name for this little thing, just like Deathloop. So I think the best name I can come up with it is Monster Walking. Kind of self-explanatory. Now, is this power a bit busted? No, I think it's perfectly actually adequate. It kind of still matches up with Gold Experience Requiem pretty well. The real problem is the rest of the abilities. We still have the shadow regeneration Requiem had and the AoE stand buff to deal with as well. Honestly, get rid of the regeneration and you can still probably keep the AoE. However, it's much tighter and Polnareff gets to choose who gets the buff. So during that whole encounter, Bruno's group was actually very powerful, but they didn't know why. So taking a step back and looking at Silver Chariot Requiem, I did more tweaking and removing than I ever did adding. So I think I did a pretty good job in that regard. However, what I left and what I tweaked made this stand ridiculously busted, but most of the ingredients were there. So I don't think I actually did anything too egregious. Giving a mini star platinum, GR level abilities made this thing nasty. Mind you too, I still say mini star platinum because some of the guidebooks actually state that the Requiem buff does increase physical stats. So the weaker part 5 Silver Chariot might just become his prime self in terms of stats in the Requiem state. Hands down, top 5 strongest stands hypothetically, and is basically on the same level as GR, potentially even higher because, well, Silver Chariot itself is stronger than Gold Experience. And that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this little hypothetical I made with Polnareff and how he could possibly get Silver Chariot Requiem, and also clean up the misconceptions about Requiem as well. And tell me what you think about Silver Chariot Requiem. Did I change him too much? Did I change him too little? Did you have a completely different interpretation of what it could become? Tell me in the comments down below. With that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.